Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome back to another PorscheCooled Podcast. My name is Michael Barth. In a minute, we're going to chat with Steve through Zoom as usual. As some of you guys know, Steve and I are in different locations. I was in London. I've just flown to Bahrain, but I'm going to chat about that when I get Steve connected through Zoom. And Steve is in Sydney, Australia. Steve owns GT3 997, and I own a 997 Carrera. Like I said, if you've listened to the podcast before, you know that story, but just for new listeners, and I know we're getting a lot of new listeners at the moment, so I just should remember to say that at the beginning. We also have a Instagram, PorscheCooled, one word. Check that out. That's just enjoying Porsches, all types of Porsches, water and air cooled. Got a strong following over there on Instagram, so if you haven't seen our Instagram, PorscheCooled, go over there and give us a follow. Say hello on one of the posts. Say that you've come from the podcast. It'd be great if you could do that. But I think I'll stop talking. I think what we'll do is we'll get Steve. I'll get Steve hooked up through Zoom. Hopefully the audio quality is better than it was on the last podcast. I know there was some issues on that last podcast. But when I get Steve on the line, we can chat about all those things. So just give me a second and we'll get Steve on Zoom from Sydney, Australia. Okay, we're back. We're live via, depends what country you come from, Zoom. Hi, Steve.
Hey, mate. How you going?
I'm well.
Via?
I'm
Really?
well. Yep. Isn't it via or via? Isn't that how you do it?
Don't know.
Bath and bath. Is that right?
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if that's
Yeah,
right or
Bath.
not. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. Steve, what's been happening? It's Wednesday. What have you been doing?
Yeah, not much. Bit of a quiet one. I went for a quick drive to see my parents today, which is always a nice-ish drive.
In the GT3?
In the GT3. Bit of a weird story, but Walter, my dog, my mini schnauzer, Walter, named after Walter Roll, has been unwell.
See,
so I took him to the vet.
Everyone just note that Steve's passion goes deep. His dog is named after Walter Roll. Now, if you...
Because he's German.
Huh? Enthusiast.
Yeah.
A true
he's German.
enthusiast.
You're like this. Walter's had an upset stomach, blah, blah, blah. Took him to the vet. Vet said, just feed him rice and chicken, steamed rice and chicken, which we did. Everyone keeps asking me if it's... asking me whether it's Hainanese chicken rice, which is hilarious.
Gourmet chicken for your dog. He deserves it. He deserves it.
He's a good dog, but mate, he keeps farting chicken rice, and it's disgusting.
Really? Great.
It stinks.
Great.
So I was worried that he'd be doing his thing in the car as I was driving him to mum and dad's for a visit.
So the GT3 would have a nice odor for a few weeks. Goes into that nice fabric, the nice 911R insert seats. Hey, we should just talk about that because I don't think we spoke about that in the last episode, did we? About your new seat inserts?
I thought we did, but
we did?
Not.
Okay, maybe I forgot.
Yeah, we did because remember I was worried that it was completely sort of, I think I used the words Porsche tragic, and
that's right.
You posted it on
that's right.
Your Instagram thing?
We did talk about it. I want you to talk about that
photo
that I want you to talk about that other photo you sent me of the 911R as well with that extinguisher. Should talk about that. How you get that, get that. Before we get into that though, let me just begin the podcast, and let me just begin with my travels, I guess, because I want to share this story, and I thought it was appropriate, Steve, because last week we finished on COVID. So, in the theme of COVID and the theme of the pandemic, I thought we'd start the conversation.
This is the COVID-cooled part of your podcast.
I thought we'd start the Porsche chat on COVID, but it's kind of related. Today's Wednesday morning. On Saturday morning, Steve knows this, so Steve will just be listening in the background because he's heard this story before. But on Saturday morning, we flew out of London. Yes, we do fly during this period. We're probably crazy. I know a lot of people are saying, don't fly. Why are you flying? But I thought it was going to be as it was, Steve, on the way when we came from Bahrain a couple of months ago. There's a lot more people flying. And the problem was our flight was actually cancelled. There's 2 flights to Bahrain on Gulf Air, one in the morning and one in the evening. And obviously the evening flight is a better one because, you leave late and you come in early in the morning. So this time we had to catch the day flight because the night flight was cancelled. And the plane was full. And usually they put a separate space next to you. I had to actually ask for the space. A lot of people were upset because they didn't actually have a spare seat, which I would have been as well.
Isn't that some airline protocol?
I thought it was.
Are they allowed to do that?
It's protocol to the point if the plane's not full, they can do it, but it's not.
Oh, okay.
So the woman in front of us complained, and she got moved. There were a couple of empty rows here and there, but they were blaming the ground staff that Gulf Air stipulates that it has to be a seat, but they're saying the ground staff moved people around because the flight was full.
Right.
But I requested it, and we got ours, but the guy did say it's very full. I'm not sure if I can give you a spare seat. So,
It's a bit disconcerting.
A little bit. And there was a lot of transit passengers on our flight, which were when you get off the plane. So basically, I just want to talk about about the situation, because I was listening to Spike's Car Radio, and I'm behind on Spike's Car Radio. That's one of my favorite podcasts, and I think it's a lot of people that enjoy Porsche. Yeah, Porsches is Spike and Zuckerman. And he was talking about the test in LA, and he was saying how it was fast, it was a bit uncomfortable and whatever, and they can do it in their car, and they just have to cough a couple of times, and basically you swab yourself. You actually do the test yourself. In Bahrain, they don't let you do the test yourself. So when you arrive at the airport, you have to get a COVID test. And this COVID test is not, I guess I didn't think it was going to be that uncomfortable. I know they swab your nose, but in my head it was like, oh, they just put a little cotton bud up your nose and they swab it. No, that's not what happens. They have this thing which is about this long, Steve, and it's flexible.
Did you feel a tickle in the scrotum?
Yeah, so eventually when you get to the testing thing, I mean, it delayed our exit from the airport by about 45 minutes because you can't get off the plane until all the transit passengers get off because they have to go to a different area because they don't get tested. And then the people exiting Bahrain, you have to get tested. We're residents of Bahrain, so it doesn't make it any faster. You still have to just wait. But you do it on an app and you pay for it. It's a test. It's quite expensive. It's $60 dinner per person for 2 tests. You have to get a test when you enter and then a test 10 days after. Anyway, the test is a stick. And you sit in this seat.
That's it. It's just a stick.
Then there's an Arab woman. I had an Arab woman. And they put this stick. You put your head back. Oh, my God. I have never, and I don't know if I'm weak. I know I've got a weak stomach in general. Like I'll reach at the side of any kind of shit on the ground or whatever. But honestly, seriously, mate, they put this stick. It goes down your nose and it curls and goes back. It doesn't go into your brain, luckily, but it goes into your throat. And my eyes just started watering. And she had it in there for that long. I had to say, can you pull it out now? Can you pull it out now? Like it was actually getting to the point where it was, I don't know. I can't even explain the feeling. I found it that bad. Now, maybe I'm just weak, but honestly, and we have to do this test again, Steve, in 10 days' time. We have to do this test in 10 days. So, next Wednesday we have to do another test. That's how it works. So basically our test was negative. It comes back like 10 hours later. We had it the next morning. The test came back negative. And then we do another one to make sure we're still negative after the 10-day incubation type period. But man, and then I listened to Spike Thurston's one yesterday, and it's like, man, that's easy. Please give me that test where you just swab the back of your throat and, swab your nose yourself.
Because you've been tested before, haven't you? Is that the first time you got the long stick?
That's the first time I've been tested.
Oh, I thought you'd been tested before. Okay, see, I haven't here as well. So I've just heard all the stories.
We were supposed to go and we didn't go.
Right. Well, when they turn up with the long stick on whenever it is, 6 days from now, just get your scissors out and cut the stick.
Yeah, and as Steve knows, we just had a knock at the door then, and it was the wrong, and it was the Ministry of Health. So two Arab women greet me in full hazmat type suits with masks, and they've got their little, they've got their 30 centimeter tube, 2 30 centimeter tubes with 2 sticks in it, and it's like, oh my God, I'm not doing that test again. I'm thinking, why are they giving us a test? We're negative. And it was the wrong, it was our address, but the wrong name and wrong phone number. So, I mean, the one thing I have to say about Bahrain, it's very, very organized. And it sounds like the one that Spike went to in LA. LA was quite organized as well, drive in and whatever, and he went there. But it is very organized. I mean, I guess it's good to get tested and know for sure. I mean, you have caught a very busy flight from London. London is, cases yesterday were insane, so I think it's all good. Anyway, back in Bahrain, mate. It's good to be back. It's really nice here. The sun has been shining. I've been to the gym twice. I've been to the swimming pool twice. Sounds like I'm on holidays, but I'm not. But it is kind of it is kind of refreshing to be back in the sun. But it was really good to be in London, and I have to say that London. And people have seen the view before, but I really sometimes don't appreciate the view from that flat. I mean, the flat has got a great view, so it is nice to be there. When we have a lot of our things there as well, so obviously we have things here and things there, and we have things everywhere actually at the moment. But and also in Sydney, so it's a bit weird living like this. But it was good to be back, and it was really good.
I don't know how you
it was
do
really good to catch up with Nick. I know you've spoken to Nick on Instagram, but it was good to catch up with Nick, and it was good to Nick to take me out on that drive. He offered that
seems like a cool dude. Nice,
yeah, he
nice
is,
bloke.
and he offered that way back in January, and at the time I couldn't because we were only in London for a short period, and then we're coming back to Bahrain. So we said when I came back to London we would catch up, which we did. So that was good. The good news is I'm not driving the beat up Audi anymore here in Bahrain, Steve. They took it off me. Don't know why.
It finally went up in a ball of flames, or
Yeah, well, it should.
lost brakes and went over a cliff.
Yeah. So I'm not driving a 911. I wish I was. I'm driving a Mercedes SUV, but it's still more comfortable than the Audi. So I'm driving an ML Merc, an old ML Merc 350 AMG or whatever it is. 350 AMG.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not bad. You've driven one of those before, I think, haven't you?
We went around Tassie. Remember when I was talking about driving around Tasmania?
Yeah.
That was for our pre-honeymoon, like straight after we got married. We went for 2 days down to Tassie, and I think I booked just a C-Class because I previously had booked a shitty Hyundai or whatever, and really sort of rued the fact that I didn't get something decent. So I got a C-Class Merc, and then my wife really, really wanted to kind of upgrade it to a SUV Merc because they kind of gave us the chance to. I think we were playing the Hey We're Newlyweds card.
Yeah.
So they offered to kind of upgrade us.
You got to use it when you can.
Yeah, you do. You actually do have to use it when you can.
It's only once
but
in a
I actually
lifetime.
regret that. That Merc SUV was shit.
Yeah.
I reckon a C-Class would have been much more fun, just a rear-wheel drive.
Well, Natasha, my wife, she said, you enjoyed the Q7 better, didn't you? And when I first came here, they gave me a Q7 for a couple of months. And I did. And the Q7, I think maybe because it is Audi, it is VW Group, it was more planted on the road. It felt like a sportier car. I think, obviously, it's a longer car. I think it's longer than the ML. But the ML, and I know Mercedes AMG-Ts wouldn't feel like this, and AMGs, etc.
Sure.
But it feels soft. Sure. Like compared to the Q7, it feels a bit, it feels a bit soft to me.
So that I can see you, no one else can see you, but you kind of put your arms out and flit it around a little bit. That's exactly how I felt with that rental in Tasmania. Like the whole time, I sort of felt like I was on a pogo stick, and I just don't like that sensation. I'm so used to in all of my cars sitting with my ass like so low to the ground. So anytime I ride in an SUV, including the Macan, it always feels like just way too high, and like the center of gravity's too high. Anyway.
In the Middle East, though, it is better to be in an SUV. I find it feels better when you're on the roads here. I think it's because there is, the view that you have, because there is a lot of high-speed roads, and because people don't indicate, they don't use any indication. I think for that respect, and people change at the last minute, like they'll just literally change in front of you, without any warning and no indicator.
Yep.
So I kind of like being on the road, but then, braking this thing, the brakes to me, it's really hard to modulate the brake pedal. Like if I put it too hard, it grabs like crazy, and I feel like we're going to go through the windscreen. But then if you do it too slow and you're trying to put that pressure on, it still doesn't feel like it's going to stop. So I really don't like that. Like the Audi brakes were 100% better. Look, I think a Macan here or a Cayenne would be fantastic. I think a Porsche Macan or a Cayenne here would be fantastic. Obviously better to have a 911. But I think in the Middle East you'd need an SUV and you'd need your 911. I think you need two cars. If you lived here permanently, I think you would, for a long time, I think you'd plan to have two, because I think it works. The weekend you have your 911, and just when you're doing your errands and running around here and during the week, it's your SUV. But anyway, the Merc is still better than the It's sort of better than the Audi in some ways. At least it's got no warning lights buzzing at me every time I turn it on, the 10 warning lights.
Yeah, right.
All right, so back to the podcast. We're on the podcast, but it's still talking cars, but back. No more COVID, no more Mercedes-Benz. We got another review during the week, and I know who it was, the guy from Australia, so thank you for doing that. And he gave us a good review, and he said it was good because there's no ads on the Apple Podcast, so I kind of know who it is. And he's a nice guy. He's been chatting on my channel on YouTube for a while.
Okay.
So I just want to get onto that. This podcast, we have no sponsors on this podcast. We're very small compared to most podcasts out there, to established podcasts who've been around for years. In saying that, Steve, our downloads have increased by 40% over the last month. And I showed you those figures there. It's actually more. Over the last 2 weeks, it's 60% more downloads over the last 2 weeks. We're constantly in the top 20 on what they say is how they judge podcasts, which is the Apple podcast charts, because Apple has the most downloads. We're in the top 100 and top 20 in the UK. We're in top 5 in Southeast Asia countries. In Southeast Asia, they like us. And... but it's always changing.
You, then.
No. But in the US, the other day, I think we were 55 or 56, and I think that's probably the highest we've been in the US. And US has a lot of podcasts, and this is purely, Steve, for automotive podcasts. So the charts for automotive podcasts, not for every podcast, just automotive. In Australia, I think the highest we've got was about 6. I think I put that on my Instagram story. We got to 6 in Australia. But in general, it's really good. We appreciate the support. The downloads are increasing, dramatically. So obviously you guys are enjoying what we're chatting about, which is great. But if you want to help the
farting.
Yeah, and about dogs and about COVID, you enjoy that conversation. No, it's all about Porsche. But there's other ways, Steve, as you know, that people can support the podcast. And that's through Patreon. And that's through joining the top tier is probably the best tier. I mean, I price them very, very low. I think they're very, very low. And I looked at other podcasts that are up on Patreon, and there's a lot. So I didn't want to price it too high. So for $5 US a month, you get early access to these episodes, 24-hour early access. You get a shout-out for new members, and you'll get, coming soon when we have a few more members on Patreon, we'll do some live Q&As, Steve, somehow. I'm not sure how to do that yet or where we'll do it through. We might do it through YouTube, or... we might do a half an hour of question taking, which would be interesting. You're up for that, aren't you?
I guess so.
But it's encouraging. If you join Patreon, like I said, it helps us out. It'll help us get some new equipment in the beginning, which we're trying to get a hold of, recording equipment and microphone equipment. So that's PorscheCooled. We have a new member on PorscheCooled on Patreon who joined PorscheCooled Exclusive, and that's James from the US. James owns a 991 Carrera and a 996 Carrera, both Carrera 2s. And James's alter ego is Auto Amateur. So I thank James for joining PorscheCooled. That was a surprise and well appreciated. So thank you, James.
Go, James.
And the PorscheCooled owner stories, the one with Nick went really, really well. You guys seem to really like the one with Nick. So that's great. The one with James went up yesterday on Tuesday. So James talks about his first 911, which was a 996 Carrera 4 Cabriolet, which he hates now. I think that's a word to use it. You listen to it, Steve. He hates it, right?
On it.
Yeah.
He didn't sound that keen on it.
He didn't like it. And he made the point about how the hardtop was just a pain in the ass to take on and off. So basically...
But that was with the benefit of hindsight, though, wasn't it? Didn't sound like he hated it when he had it.
See, I still think cabs are coming back. I still think I'm right. I still think in a year's time, people are going to go, oh, Michael from PorscheCooled was right. The cabs are back.
Okay.
So
I'm not sure I agree with that.
That was yesterday. That's had a lot of downloads so far. So check that out if you haven't already. This podcast I'm talking now is obviously you're listening to this on a Friday, but the previous episode was PorscheCooled Stories. The audio wasn't 100% in that episode, so I apologize for that. I probably shouldn't say that because now you guys are going to notice it, and you probably wouldn't have noticed it before. But the audio was had a few issues on James's side. I did fix it as much as I could. But I think it's still okay. It's still listenable. Sometimes Zoom and, there's electrical interference as well, and it doesn't always work out. But I think it's okay, Steve. You think it's okay?
I think you're being hard on yourself, mate. I think it was completely fine, but yeah.
Okay.
It's just hard over Zoom and everything.
Yeah. And Yesterday I was a bit ill, not coronavirus. I was just ill because I didn't sleep the night before. And I woke up yesterday afternoon and Tasha had framed my new poster illustration that I purchased. And I got that from Guy Allen in the UK. And I kind of forgot about his work. I kind of forgot about his stuff that you could buy. And Nick reminded me of it, of him. He bought a couple. I think he bought a couple of posters. I think Nick's getting his professionally framed though. I just went and bought an IKEA frame from IKEA here. I could go to a proper framer, and I probably should, but I think when I take this poster back to Sydney, Steve, I'll get it framed properly. But just about Guy Allen, if you haven't come across him before, he's based in the UK. Every illustration that he does, it's his illustration. They're signed and numbered, Steve. Most of them, I think, are limited to 200. He doesn't reprint them again. That's it. Once it's done, it's sold out, and then he does another one. He's got 2 Porsches ones on there at the moment, I think. Only 2. He's got the 911 and he's got the Mund, like my period correct hat. So he's got that one, which is quite nice, which is a 356. I bought the 911 one. Mine's number 16 of 200.
Yep.
And his work, if you're not familiar with Guy Allen, and this is not an ad, of course, this is just a bit of passion thing here, talking that we always like to add. He's done posters and illustrations for Porsche. He's also done them for Audi, BMW, and many other companies. I think it's just guyallen.co.uk, the website. I didn't actually write it down, but I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And he also did the ones for the Peterson Museum in LA, the Peterson Automotive Museum in LA. And he did them for that exhibition they had, Steve, on, which would have been a great one to go to, which was called the Porsche Effect, which was on from 2018 to 2019, which was when Porsche was celebrating the 70th anniversary of the 911, was it? When they had the 70th anniversary celebrations.
Yep.
Do a search for that on Google, actually. The posters for that Porsche Effect exhibition are really, really good. Like they
do some good stuff. I've seen Guy Allen's work, and because it's a little bit in line with some of the stuff that I kind of do. I actually agree. Like I thought a lot of his work is actually really very nicely crafted.
Yeah.
Illustrating cars and everything it's a bit of a funny thing. Like there's a lot of graphics that kind of find its way on T-shirts and everything, but to do it really, to kind of get the nuance of it and capturing movement and everything with vector art is actually not an easy thing to do. Very skillful.
It's also the inks that he used, because he uses obviously that he uses very high quality pigment inks, right? And he says he uses those inks because it would not fade with age. And it's also the paper, the quality of the paper when you feel the poster, it's beautiful because I wrote it down. What was it? 100% cotton rag paper, and it's got a matte finish.
So it's art rag.
And even Tasha, when she unpacked it, I think she thought I was a bit crazy for buying it. It's not super cheap. They're 90 pounds, right? But it's an artwork. But when you see it, and I'm looking at it now because I've got it just next to me, and the colours are beautiful and the quality is just amazing. There's another guy on Instagram that does illustrations of Porsche, and I'm trying to find his name. And he actually did one of my 997. Did you see that when I posted
that guy.
it on? Craig. His name's Craig, and it's just a sketch. And he's been doing Magnus Walker's ones, and he did Road to Ren Lines one, and he did one of my 997, which was nice of him. I didn't pay for it. Usually he charges, and he just used one of my photos, and I thought that was quite nice.
Yep.
Did you see it?
Different sort of style. Yeah, I did. I saw that he was doing. You made the big leagues. You're an influencer. I'd noticed that he kind of did different sort of Porsche influences. Quite a different style though. Like it's sort of more hand done as opposed to sort of vector style.
I think he realised I was PorscheCooled, and he didn't, because it was through P997.1. I had that image, and I think he realised I was PorscheCooled, so he did one for me. He seems like a nice guy. Right. I thanked him for it because I know they are commissioned, and he does charge people for them. So, but it's completely different to the Guy Allen one. The Guy Allen one is really, really special. But like you said, it's not so easy to do these illustrations, is it? It's not an easy process.
I actually did some stuff for Autohouse back in the day. Some of their kind of livery, and I'm going to get too technical, but I did an illustration of a 73 RS and a 997 GT3 RS completely out of vectors, and it took me ages. It was like, it was like more than a week's work.
You should show me.
We're just sort of sitting there.
Do my car.
You will have seen it. It was on the side of their motorsport truck for a very long time.
Oh, I can't remember. I'll have to look.
Yeah.
Have to do a search and see if it comes up.
Yeah. Sort of photorealistic looking. Anyway.
Would you buy a Guy Allen Porsche print?
I would.
I actually like the Mund one. I like the Mund one. No,
I was being smart ass is cool.
because you've got no money.
Yeah, pretty
Because
much.
you're about to buy another wooden knob because you already have one and you need another one.
Yeah, you just reminded me of a bit of Chase, Joel.
Someone asked me about that during the week, actually. Oh, no, I told James. Did I tell him on the podcast? Maybe I told James on the podcast. I told him he should look at it for the 996.
You did.
Yeah, that's right. For the
did.
black one, I told him that he should look into it. I'm not sure if he will, but I did actually mention it. That's about it, I think. So back to PorscheCooled stories. I was going to talk about Porsche's celebrating 70th years in the US, but I don't think that's necessary today. So back to PorscheCooled stories. PorscheCooled stories, as you know, as I say at the beginning of each PorscheCooled story, and this is not a PorscheCooled story, but I thought we'd come back today and just talk to Steve a little bit more about his ownership journey and his story, because people are interested, Steve. And, you're elusive, and people are interested. You don't post any posters, pictures, images on your Instagram, and you're part of PorscheCooled, and you don't really show people what you're about. Except you do share a lot on this, I have to say.
Yeah, for me I do. But yeah. Like it probably is easiest to just ask me questions and
we'll go through it.
I'll
but
ramble about it.
I think why I like that we started doing PorscheCooled stories, and that comes up on a Tuesday. And as I want people to know that it's not every Tuesday. It's a lot of work for me to do 2 podcasts a week. In between everything else that's going on. And last week I did struggle with it because I was traveling as well. But I think it's a really good idea that we had. And like I said, we're not going to take ownership for the idea. I mean, people talk about Porsche stories before. I mean, Porsche has their own videos on YouTube, 911 stories or whatever. But because
for them to hit you up actually.
Because Porsche hit me up. I want Porsche Bahrain to hit me up. If anyone's listening from Bahrain and has contacts with Porsche here, hit them up and let me give me a press car, and I can do videos on it and podcast about it. But I think the best thing about PorscheCooled stories is, even though you might own a 997, the same model, every 911 means a different thing to everyone. Do you know what I mean? Everyone has a different story, and that's what PorscheCooled stories are all about. That's basically why we do it. And it also adds to the conversation. It makes our conversation richer. It makes our chat richer, because we've got, we don't know everything about every model. We don't, as I said before in the previous episode, Steve, and we agreed with this, we're not experts. We're enthusiasts. We don't always get it right, but we love talking about what we talk about, and we really enjoy doing this podcast. So that's why we keep it up. So today,
I think it's just a lot of the time there's just those interesting little backstories and anecdotes about, I don't know, sometimes kind of what it means to you or whatever else, but often some of the kind of little nuances that you pick up in the experience of driving the car or looking at the car or whatever. And it's like, I thought about it like that, and kind of agree with that. So
you're right.
I found that interesting. Yeah.
But everyone's heard my story 1,000 times over, either whether it's on Instagram or the YouTube channel, or even Drive Tribe, which I'm actually still a part of Drive Tribe. I'm still on their program. I'm still one of their people, so I still put the podcast up on that. But I think we need to hear about more of your story, Steve, so that's why we decided to do this today.
Yeah, sure.
So let's talk about that now. Let's talk about Steve. And I think what was interesting in Nick's episode and James's episode is that, where they grew up in, James's grew up in Liverpool and Nick grew up in northern England. Sorry, Nick, I can't remember exactly where. I should have written this down. I need to do more research before these episodes, but Nick is Northern England. But I think it's the fact, and it was the same as me, Steve. I lived in, and I'm not when I was. This is from when I was 10. I lived in a place called Wyong in New South Wales, which is a really not a small town, because I used to live in a country town that had less than 2,000 people, and it still has around 2,000 people. No one moves in there; it just stays the same. And when I was in Wyong, the thing that I used to enjoy, and it was a Sunday afternoon, I used to get on my bike and I used to ride to the Pacific Highway. And this is when the main way from north coast to Sydney was through Wyong. It was on the Pacific Highway. And on Sundays, a lot of cars used to drive through there, nicer cars that I'd never seen. And I think that's the first time I saw a Porsche, is just I used to just sit and watch the cars, which sounds a bit weird now, but that's what I used to do. And then, my first memory, I saw a 80s Carrera in the dealership, you know what I mean? And I saw it there and it was like, wow, that's so cool. It was a green one, actually. It was oak green, your favorite color. And, with Nick and James, it was like the same. You don't see many Porsches in the 911s where you live. It's very rare. It's not like there's one everywhere.
Yeah.
And you were brought up in Sydney, so you lived in Sydney.
Yeah, it's still sort of like suburban.
So what was your first memories?
I grew up in sort of like a fairly sort of middle-class suburban kind of part of Sydney, nowhere kind of posh or anything like that. And to be honest, I'm sure I've obviously kind of seen a Porsche or a 911 before that, but I actually can't remember. The one that sort of sticks mainly in terms of influence is actually my uncle. So I mentioned it previously. My uncle on my mum's side of the family, mum and my uncle's father raised 9 kids in Malaysia, had his own sort of timber trucking kind of company. So very, very modest upbringing for my mum with 9 or 8 brothers and sisters. But apparently they got the bug from him in terms of this thing for German engineering. Even though he was not a wealthy man, all that sort of stuff, he had this massive appreciation for German cars to the point where he would only buy like used a Beetle for my grandma, and he'd save up and kind of buy older Mercs. So somehow that kind of got to mum and my uncle, and my mum actually really has this massive appreciation for cars. She hasn't owned a Porsche, but she's driven Beamers, and
it's not too late. Tell your mum it's not too late. She can still get one.
It's probably not too late. She actually has a massive appreciation for it, because whenever I've bought cars, and particularly the 911s, she's loved them. She just looked at them, and you can just sort of tell she's kind of got that sort of thing in her where she kind of actually knows what it's about.
But the first memory of seeing a 911, that was your uncle's 911 in what year?
My uncle's. So that, can't remember how old I was. I was probably early 20s. I reckon I would have been driving at the time my WRX.
But before that, you don't have any memory of a 911 that you thought, wow, I'm going to get one of those one day?
Not in the same way that I heard Nick and James sort of talking about it. It's not like this moment where I was kind of, eating an ice cream, walking down the street and something whizzed past and all that sort of shit. Like
magazines?
Not at all. I can't.
What about in a magazine?
Yeah, I used to, because I used to consume like tons of like I used to buy in Australia it's Wheels and Motor magazine.
Yeah.
But also I was reading Performance Car, which then sort of turned into Evo, and I'd consume and buy like pretty much every mag there was. But I can't really remember it. The first sort of notable experience with a 911 was my uncle's 86 Carrera, the 3.2 Carrera. It was white with a whale tail, which was optional, not my favourite thing. It didn't have Fuchs wheels on it. The Fuchs, it had
oh really?
Those horrible Simmons wheels, which are an Australian thing.
Yeah, they're not nice.
Well, Simmons wheels are sort of appreciated in the sort of kind of motorsport type crowd, but you just kind of, when you look at an old Porsche like that, an old 80s Porsche, you'd sort of hope that it had basically black Fuchs on it, but it didn't have them. And yeah, look, I just remember kind of my uncle had this sort of habit of, he's a mad kind of car guy, so he was buying a new car every bloody year. He's like 70 something, and I think at the moment
that
he's
car,
still got
sorry Steve, that car would have been about 10 years old at the time when you first saw it. So it was an 80s car. You probably saw it in the 90s, mid 90s, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So it was only about 10 years old at the time, so it wasn't a very old car.
I guess so. I never thought about it like that. I just sort of viewed it as an old car, because to be honest, I didn't really know much about 911s then. Like, the influence and the bug came from my uncle, basically, because I was really into cars. Like, like I said, I was driving a WRX at that point. So, I'd sort of had some reasonable cars given, from, starting at 19, I think. I'd already kind of tipped every cent that I had into cars, basically. And it was all the influence of my uncle and my mum. And then he was in Beamers. He had I can't remember off the top of my head, some pretty cool old E30 Beamers and stuff like that. But one day he just kind of rolled up in his new used Porsche, and it was like, oh man, that's so cool. It sounded great.
Yeah.
I only drove it. I think I already told you the story when he decided to kind of sell the thing. He traded it for a 993. And I told you that story where he kind of came around and told me to kind of take it for a spin, and I couldn't drive it properly. I couldn't.
You didn't like the gearbox, right? And it had it was G50 as well because it was a 88.
Yeah,
model,
but he
right?
said that there was an issue with it. To be fair to me,
okay.
I just remember being so excited to kind of jump in and kind of take it for a proper hoon kind of thing. But I was just sort of searching for the gears every time I kind of put the clutch to the floor, and then I was trying to find a gear. I couldn't tell what gear I was in.
Right. I was listening to something. I was listening to Spike's Go Radio, and he said the 82 Carrera is a really good one. And I read that somewhere else too. I'm not sure why the 82 Carrera is. Not 82 Carrera. 82 Targa. The 82 Targa apparently is a good model Targa to buy, which kind of surprises me because when you buy the Carrera in that same generation, the G series, it's the 87 to 89 model, right? Because of the G50 gearbox.
That's what my uncle always used to sort of say. Because when did the SC finish? I don't know. I'm not knowledgeable enough.
I'm not sure.
On this.
I'm not sure. Is it 80? 81?
Yeah, not sure. I know. Like back in those days, I remember people sort of saying, "Oh, the SC isn't the good one." And my boss owned one of the partners in the advertising agency that I worked for had one. And I thought that was kind of an amazing car as well.
I really like the
I never
SC,
got to try that.
but don't you? I really like the SC logo on the back. There's something really cool about the font and how it looked in that black. And it was
Well, the 992, the logo type for the 911, I think is isn't that from an SC?
Oh, is it?
I think so. That it looks that sort of squared off type.
Right. So the 992 has SC inspiration in the logo.
There's bits of it, yeah.
And then it has 70s
also the
inspiration.
interior.
That's 70s inspiration in the interior, though, isn't it? It's not 80s.
I'm not sure. Again, I'll probably get more.
No, I think someone said it was
harking
harking to the 70s style a little bit. Maybe it's maybe it's just
with
a
the
bit of everything.
gauges.
Yeah, the flat.
The type on the gauges and the green markings and some of that sort of stuff. I think.
You know, even though it's tech heavy, I really do like. I really do like the new 992 dash. I think they've done I think they've done a great job of it. I think that even the fact that they've just kept the analog dial, one analog dial, it still works when you see it. It still looks like the Porsche dash. I think Porsche have really, they've excelled themselves with that interior. It's a really nice interior.
Oh, I just like some of the little touches, the kind of panel that runs horizontally. That's sort of like one of the design features of the thing, which of the car, sort of having that kind of horizontal line that runs all the way across. They've sort of reinforced that. They put like wooden inserts, which can be a little bit naff, but I actually think it looks quite good in
did you
992 and stuff like that.
Did you see I know you don't like watching him, but Magnus Walker had a 911 Carrera S, and he did a short video of it on his channel. His videos, I don't know who does his editing, but he's really got to get someone better. But he did a 911S, and it was in. Did I talk about this in the last episode? I can't remember. In I can never say that word. Aventura in green, and it had those seats with the checkerboard, the fabric type ones. Yep. That seat, which I think are the best. That's the best. I would get that insert, and it was a manual, but it had the wood. It just had that bit of touch of wood. Honestly, Steve, it looked fantastic. It actually really, really worked. It has a bit of wood on the doors and it has a bit of wood on... I'm using my hands here to gesture, but Steve can see what I'm doing. The wood across the bottom of the dash there. And it looked really good. The only thing I didn't like was the console around the shifter, because it was a manual, is that it looks like that stuff that Merc used in the C-Class, which looks really nasty, that black, shiny, gloss plastic finish.
Like piano black type finish.
Which I'm not a fan of. I thought if you picked wood, that would be wood as well, but it wasn't. Unless that's another option you can pick. This car wasn't very highly optioned. It was quite standard. It had satin platinum wheels, the more spaced out rim, which I quite like on the S. Had black calipers, not red. But the wood trim, it was, you know what it was? It was a combination of wood trim with those Sportex or whatever those seats are called, with those seats, with that checkerboard seat, which worked really, really well. It looked retro, but not too retro.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, but there's some kind of cues in the interior that I really like in the 992. So I agree. Yeah.
All right. So first 911 was the Carrera of your uncle's.
Mm-hmm.
So when you want to should we go on?
No, you go.
So so when you decided you wanted a 911, the car you were driving before you had your 911 was, and I think we've mentioned this before, people will probably remember, but the S3, correct?
Yeah,
the Audi S3.
I'd done the usual kind of thing, like as a young guy, you know, like been through, had an MX-5 WRX, S3 VR6.
I never knew you had an MX-5. I never knew that.
That was my first car.
Really?
And
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I've been looking at them online because all I have are amazing memories of that first gen MX-5. Again, my uncle had one.
Did you have the green one, that special
his.
edition green one they did with the tan interior?
Clubman. No, I had a white one.
I used to always see that one in Wallara when I lived in Wallara in Sydney. I used to walk past it. It was parked on the street, and I thought, man, that's so cool, that car.
It's a great car. I'd actually like if I had a lazy. I've been following them online because
we should say though,
I think
listeners in the US, it's not MX-5, it's Miata.
It's a Miata, yeah. So it's the NA Miata. Like awesome, really. I'd be more than happy to kind of sort of find one and sort of tootle around in that because it's just such a fun car. Anyway, so
yeah, people say they're great. Even the new one gets quite well reviewed, actually. I've heard many well-known journalists quote about that. It's a great drive for what it is, for the money, value for money, and the drive, and the lightweight, and the engine, and whatever. It all works really well together. So
the point to bringing that up. Sorry, the point to bringing that up was a little bit more just that we've sort of had slight chats about it, but I'm kind of curious to sort of see. Well, I sort of make this assumption that people kind of get to 911s after they've probably been in a few kind of performance type cars, and obviously when you're a young guy, back in those days, you're probably kind of getting into a VTEC Honda or, if you could afford a European kind of thing, then no doubt you probably would have tried a GTI. Like I was fortunate enough to kind of get into a VR6. Like there's sort of like a bit of an ilk of a performance car that's sort of a bit more inexpensive, but eventually you kind of go, okay, it's time. Like I'm going to, stop fooling around in, all of these sort of hot hatches or these other sorts of cars. And at that point in time, I reckon I used to swap my car, and even for a sort of youngish person from 19 to about 27 or thereabouts. I reckon I changed car every year and a half, 18 months to 2 years, which is like kind of pretty stupid for somebody that doesn't make lots of money, blah, 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 just to tip every cent that you've got into your car. And it wasn't until I kind of got into my first 911 that the way I describe it is the itch went away. Like I just stopped hankering for, even because I was consuming so many car magazines and just watching, whatever I could, blah, blah, blah. Once you kind of get yourself into a 911, that kind of constant need to want to turn something over and to kind of get the newest, latest, fastest thing completely stopped.
Yeah, true.
So...
You just want more. You just want more 911s, though. You want, more than one. That's the thing. When you get one, you realize, this is good, but I could get the other one as well.
Yeah, my cousin at the moment, he's a mad rev head. Same side of the family, like my mum's side of the family. He loves his Volkswagen, like his GTIs and stuff like that. And I keep saying to him, it's like, man, you just got to get yourself into a 911 because you'll stop buying, car after car after car, and once you kind of get the different sort of itch, you probably hang on to something for longer than 2 or 3 years.
But he bought one and sold it, didn't he? Didn't he have a 997?
Different cousin.
Cousin.
You're talking about my uncle's son. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So when you decided, the car before the 911 was the S3, which you bought brand new.
Yep.
And then one morning you woke up and go, okay, I'm going to start looking for a 911. Is that how it happened, or you stumbled across it? And the one you bought, Steve, which you can tell everyone,
Yep.
People might remember, but the one you bought, was that the one
Yep.
that you were looking for?
So it was a lot more impulsive than that. Not quite as impulsive as sounded like James's sort of story, but
And Nick.
True. Back in those days, you'd kind of sift through the car classifieds. So this was Sydney Morning Herald, I think. Saw an ad for it, and I think I rang my uncle and just sort of, because he would have still been in his. Oh no, he would have kind of shifted from his 86 Carrera to his 993. And I just sort of found this car in a shitty little kind of car dealership on Victoria Road in Drummoyne. It was a 964 in white, but it only had, I think it was less than 40,000 K on it, which was pretty low Ks. And, reasonable price.
So that was a what model year was it? That was a 90 model, right?
It was a 1990 Grand Prix white C4.
Yeah, and that
with
1990
navy interior.
And you bought that in around, was it 2000 or was it sub 2000? I can't remember.
Oh, I can't remember now.
I think it was around 2000, wasn't it? 1999, 2000?
Might have been a little bit later than that, I suspect.
So it was at least
Maybe.
a 10-year-old car at the time, and it only had 40,000 K. So that made it quite appealing as a potential new car.
Yeah. I can't even remember why, to be honest. I think it was just like, again, because like if you think of at that time, like I was just a serial kind of, buy a car, drive it, enjoy it, mod it a little bit or whatever else, and then sort of keep itching and looking at the next thing. So the 911 thing probably kind of came from my uncle's influence. So like I think I just kind of gave him a call, and then we went just to, he would always egg me on. My uncle's terrible. Whenever you sort of say, oh, what do you think of this? He'd kind of go, let's go drive it. So we went to the dealership, got them to value the S3, looked at the car, drove it around the block, and it was obviously amazing. It was in pretty good nick. And to be honest, the car dealer had no idea what the S3 was. It was a pretty kind of niche, rare car. Yeah, I'd had it for a couple of years.
Actually, it must have been around 2002, 2003 when you bought the 964, because the S3 only came out in 2001 model year.
2000?
2000 or 2000 model year?
Or 2001.
Yeah, it was end of 2000 it came out, I think, and it was 2000, because I bought that A3 as well, and that was after you.
That's right. Yeah,
and I bought it new, that 1.8 turbo A3.
So, yeah, I racked up about 50,000 K on my S3 already as well. So, it'd been well driven. Anyway, I remember the car dealer had no idea what the S3 was, and he completely overvalued it on the changeover price. He didn't know what he was looking at. And, we kind of just sort of said to him, well, that thing was like 68 grand brand new, with all the options on it, blah, blah, blah. So give me a good price. And I can't remember, but the changeover to get into the 964 wasn't that steep. It was, look, again, for a young person, blah, 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 at that time, it's still a lot of money. But the changeover to kind of get into my first 911 was, I think it was like less than 30 grand.
Really? Did you have any hesitation, though, and your uncle having driven, 911s before, did you have any hesitation? I think I asked Nick this question, James, when they bought theirs. Did you have any hesitation with the Carrera 4, with the all-wheel drive?
No, because I wasn't well read enough. I didn't know enough about it. I obviously had my uncle as a sort of advisor and everything, and we organised a PPI. So the head mechanic at Porsche Parramatta, like one of the main dealerships, kind of did the pre-purchase inspection. So it was all checked out and everything.
So this is before you started using Autohouse. You used Autohouse, though, from then on you found Autohouse, because there's a couple of companies in Sydney, right? There's PR Technology, which a lot of people go to, which was in the same area at the time, and then there was Autohouse. Yep.
Back in those days, it was actually only Autohouse or Bob Wims were the two independents.
Oh, was it?
They were the two, two people that you had the choice of kind of using.
So PR Technology came later, did it?
Yeah, I think so. Well, I could be wrong, but because even back in those days, Autohouse weren't massive. They weren't.
They were very
the sort of
small, right?
operation that they are now.
Small operation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you bought the 964 and you had it for a few months, did you then have any concerns about having a Carrera 4 and not a Carrera 2?
No. Because
and the drive, you couldn't really feel it, right?
Yeah, you could, but again, I guess it's probably more that if you don't actually have a reference point, so if you don't have another car to kind of drive around in to kind of compare it to, like another 911,
yeah, true.
then you're never really going to know the difference.
Yeah.
I did always sort of feel that it was kind of a bit sort of nose heavy and sort of understeery. It used to kind of plow a little bit, but I can't remember how long it took me, but I wound up putting Bilsteins in that car, and it transformed this sort of handling. But it's just a great car, like.
But I guess, like you
back
said,
in those days too,
without a reference point, and then you bought your 993, and you realised the difference between a 2 and a 4, right? That's when it clicked.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I think really fond memories of the car. That car sounded amazing. The gear shift in that car is brilliant as well. I've said it a few times, but I always sort of thought that was one of the uglier kind of 911s. I got into a 964 because it was there. I was driving to work every day at that point in time, so the car was my sort of daily commuter car. So again, my uncle sort of said, you don't want to get in anything older than this because you won't really sort of be able to manage it that well in terms of maintenance and just sort of like, driving in traffic and all of that sort of stuff.
Yep. So
memories of that car are like, you're the happiest guy in the world. Like when you're bloody, like whatever I was probably late 20s. And, so spent all my money on a Porsche.
But you still remember, and I think I've asked this to both other Porsche stories, but you remember the first, when you drove that out of the dealership? I mean, you remember the first test drive basically sold you. You were done once you drove it.
Yep.
But when you picked it up, was it better than what you remember on the test drive?
Yes. Yeah. Because I think at the time too, like I don't know how you felt about it when you kind of hopped into the 997. That was the first.
Nervous. I was going to crash it. I was going to crash it on the way home. No, when I drove it on the way home. When I drove it on the way home, it was a cloudy kind of day. It looked like it was going to rain. I was nervous. I was going to like smash it or something.
Yeah. So, but you kind of get that feeling where you're sort of driving away and you kind of go, man, did I really just spend that amount of money on this?
Yeah.
Because you're kind of going, oh, well, that's a deposit on a house or whatever it is, even though you're buying a used one. But
true. I mean,
because I don't sort of check yourself, kind of going, like, it's a shitload of money that you've just spent on the thing. But as you're thinking that, at the same time, you're listening to it and you're kind of hooning along. You're not driving it nearly as quickly as you can because it's brand new to you and all of that sort of stuff. You're still finding your feet, but it's such a nice feeling.
It's such a great experience. You can't. It's always almost hard to explain. Even just you just feel so elated. You just feel so happy, and you just feel like, wow, what have I got? And for me, the money side, as you know, I wasn't that. I mean, it was still a lot of money, and I paid high 80s. Yep. But I'd also bought an Audi A4 Avant S-Line before that, which cost me about the same price. And when I sold it, I got I won't even say what I got, but it was less than buying a Tudor watch. You know what I mean? So I knew that was not a good investment, and I knew from you and from reading that the Porsche it might lose a bit, but eventually it's going to appreciate, and I'm going to get myself what I purchased it for back. I mean, it's not like I was worried so much. I mean, sure, it's still scary when you take that much money out of the bank and you got to pay for it. And Australia's more expensive than other countries, obviously, for 997s.
Yep.
But it's worth it. As soon as you get in the car, as soon as you pick it up from the dealer, Steve, like you said, you sit in it. And even though you're going slow back home or wherever it was, and the dealer, as you know, is close to where we live, and it was like, it's just no explaining it.
There's nothing like it too. After, like, I'm not sort of saying that I'm the most experienced person in the world with kind of other marques and everything, but I think when you're just into kind of like sort of more performance-oriented cars, even though something like back in those days, a WRX was kind of stupidly quick, the Audi was sort of a little bit more kind of luxurious. That was sort of just at the time where Audis became a little bit more kind of popular and mainstream. Yeah, I don't know. There's just something about the 911 at the time, which is just very different.
Yeah, and the Bug was so great, you bought another one. So let's just touch on the other. I mean, everyone knows about the 997 GT3, but the next one was the which one?
993. So it was a 95 Carrera, just the two-wheel drive, like the base two-wheel drive version. It was sitting in the used lot at what was Scuds, Scuderia in Willoughby, which is now Porsche Willoughby. And that was, again, my uncle, who this time he saw the ad, and then I think he buzzed me and sort of said, hey, there's a 993 manual at Scuds, let's go and have a look at it. And he knew full well what he was doing.
That was more expensive, though. At the time, that was a bigger purchase for you.
Similar. I can't remember what the changeover price was, but see, like back in those days, I was always just like basically sinking every penny that I could save or whatever else back into the car. So I'd be on this kind of constant thing where you'd kind of go, okay, I buy a car for 50. In a couple of years' time, it might be 30, so I'll take that 30. And then if I only have to kind of top it up with another, 30 and keep adding on to basically whatever money was in the car, I just basically keep doing that over and over again.
Yeah.
So that was the mindset from getting to the S3 into the 964. Then getting in from the 964 to the 993, I was just constantly just thinking about the changeover price, what it would cost me to get into the better car, basically. So I remember that was Anthony Raymond, who now works at Auto House, was the dealer at Scuds at the time.
Oh, really?
So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's very funny how you kind of paths cross again. And he looked after my uncle with a car at some point in time.
He's the guy that was based in Bahrain, right?
Yeah. Lovely guy. It was.
I haven't met him.
To,
I haven't
Bahrain.
met him.
He's super knowledgeable about all things Porsches because basically he's worked in dealerships, I think, for most of his career. And I believe he's really handy behind the wheel as well.
All right. So then the jump. Let's. I want to get onto the drive thing because we're getting close to an hour now. But
sorry.
No. So then the jump from the 964 to the 993 wasn't a huge amount of cash. But then the jump from the 993 to the next car, which was the 997 GT3, that was a lot more, right?
Yeah, it's probably twice what I usually would do. So I'd normally kind of go, if I can aim for about to have to kind of chip another 30, and we're talking Australian dollars, back into the car to kind of get into something nicer, and that sort of felt like just a thing that I kind of did in my car buying history. But the 993, basically I'd owned it for 12 years. I knew it was kind of still worth good money because at this point in time, 993s were the thing. They really were, sort of one of the kind of revered Porsches at the time. So I can't remember the absolute reason why. I think I was just kind of getting maybe a tiny bit bored or a little bit of more of an itch.
But when you started to look for 997 GT3s, I remember when you were looking, and I think you came across a red one and a black one, didn't you? Was that right, or was it a red one? I remember you came across
First
one.
GT3 I blew. First GT3 I drove was a black one.
And you missed out on one, right?
So
they were selling quite quickly when they were being listed. Was
they were
that
selling
the case?
really quickly.
Yeah, and that was when they were sitting around, 150 Australian, round about?
I think sort of it ranged from about 140 to about 160 depending on spec and mileage and stuff like that. There really weren't that many kind of there.
And tell the listeners currently what they're listed at now, 6 years later.
I reckon they're close to... there's a bit of a debate, I think, when you read stuff online, but I reckon they sort of go from about 190 to a little bit over 200. I'm curious as to know whether or not they really do fetch money over 200. But,
I would have said 220.
People ask it.
I would have said 220 to 270. That's where I would have sat.
So they've gone up.
Yep, go on.
But to be honest, if I hung on to that old 993, that also probably went up similar sort of money. But, it was a good time to kind of get in.
So the first GT3 you test drove was the black one, the red one?
Black one.
Black one?
Black one.
What did you think as soon as you got into it? That was the very first GT3 you ever driven?
Yep.
What did you think?
First GT3 I ever sat in, driven, whatever. I was by myself. Like
Was it
at this
Club
point
Sport?
in time. No, it wasn't.
Wasn't Club Sport, okay.
It had standard seats. There was a cool dealer that was down south somewhere who... What happened? Oh, I rolled up in my 993. I hadn't sold it yet. I rolled up in my 993 and I sort of explained to him that, I was kind of thinking about it, blah, blah, blah. Kind of got him to eye up my 993 as a trade-in again. And, I guess to be fair, like if somebody's going to let you drive their GT3, they kind of need to know that you're at least semi-serious. My 993 was in really good nick. He could tell that I was an enthusiast. So he eyed that up and I went for a test drive in the black GT3, and it's like, oh man, once you drive it, that's sort of why, to be perfectly honest, why I keep egging you on to kind of keep to get in one, because
no turning back.
As soon as you drive it, you just can't stop thinking about it. I do remember it being not easy to drive. Like the clutch is much, much heavier compared to sort of like a sort of more choice a bit of like a more standard kind of 911.
But this one had the comfort. They call it comfort sport seats, aren't they, or sport seats or whatever
Comfort
they are.
seats.
So it didn't have the lightweight buckets, and it didn't have a roll cage, obviously, because it wasn't club sport.
Nope.
So really, it must have been quite a different experience when you eventually. Did you test drive a one that was a club sport package, or you only had that?
Never did.
You didn't.
No.
So this was.
So I had in my mind that like maybe if I was ever going to sell the 993, I think the only car that I'd sort of really want to go for is a GT3. I went and test drove this black one. I couldn't sleep after I kind of test drove it. So then I sold my 993 in anticipation for the fact that that I knew that I'd have to kind of be ready because GT3s were so rare that I'd have to kind of have all my ducks in a row, like as opposed to kind of going, well, hopefully one will kind of pop up in a dealership, so therefore I can trade my 993 in. I also knew I had to kind of maximize my money, so selling the 993 separately and trying to get the best value out of that rather than trading it, and then hanging on to the money. So I was kind of Porscheless for a few months, and I was just then basically kind of scouring the classifieds, waiting for 997 GT3s to pop up.
And then the one you found was in Victoria. So you hadn't actually driven a club sport. Come back to that. You haven't driven it. Then you bought the one in Victoria and got delivered. How did it feel based on that first one that you drove that wasn't a club sport?
Can't really remember. I obviously remember the fact that it was just like an amazing kind of machine, and like I was right to do it. I mean, I did, just like you sort of said before, I shat myself because I just gone and bought myself a $150,000 car. And actually, at the time, I think I've said this before on your podcast, I actually got retrenched.
Yeah.
So the time that I actually physically the car,
drive it.
the car got shipped up from Melbourne. The advertising agency I was working for basically went under. I lost my job, so I had no job, and I just picked up this new GT3, or new to me GT3.
I have to say, my being a passenger in that car for the first time, I remember when you took me for a drive in it, before you'd done anything to it, it was literally you just picked it up, and we went around to Nilsson's Park there, and I think we stopped at Nilsson's Park in Vaucluse in Sydney. And we went up through there, and I thought it was the absolute best car in the world. Like, it just felt amazing. And then we got out and we were looking at it. I've got a photo, actually. I took a photo of it when we walked out. And every time I see that photo, I think, it wasn't even my car, but it was like, wow, what a car. You know what I mean? And it felt like a lot of money. It felt like, I can't believe Steve spent that much money on a car.
I know.
Like, that's
I felt like that too.
And, that was so much money. It's like, wow, 150 odd grand.
Because I don't think... Well, at that point, I'd never spent like more than 100 on a car.
Yeah, that was the most, right?
I was always sort of like always kind of hankering for like performance cars, but I was always quite frugal about, like trying to be kind of relatively smart about it. I did kind of know that getting into a GT3 because at that point in time the market was obviously kind of doing well. So I knew that, like what I sort of said before, that it wasn't going to all of a sudden, that I'd pay 150 and then one day it'd only be worth 20. I always knew that it would hold its value quite well.
Yeah, true.
But
because there was only,
to be honest,
how many are in Australia, those people know? I remember you sent me that list through. There was not many, right? A couple of hundred, isn't it?
no, there's not many. There's only a couple of hundred.
I think that list, Steve found this list and it's got 997.1 GT3s and 997.2 GT3s, and it tells you what colours were sold in Australia and how many in total. It's actually quite interesting because it's quite rare.
So Gen 1s, like mine, there's 111 GT3s, there's 31 GT3 RSs, which means that there's a total of 142.
Yeah, so when you think about it, the money you're spending for a car that's one of 111, and of that, Steve, how many white? I think white was popular color in that car.
White is the most, because it was the launch color. Carrera white was 55.
So 55. So basically, you're buying a car, and you think about the money. I keep coming back to the money, the value for money. It's one of 110. There's 55 white ones. Some of the colors is only like 2. It's rare. It is very, very rare. And, I keep worrying, and I've said this to you many times, that I think I've missed the boat on the 997, that the price, and this is why people are asking, a couple of people are asking in high 200s for it now in Australia. But you can see why.
I don't think you missed the boat. Yeah, I honestly don't think that you missed the boat because, I obviously just kind of keep following it as you do. I've said it before. Like, there's always like a couple on the market, and I can't see that sort of necessarily changing. Particularly, I don't know. I think probably true enthusiasts probably will kind of constantly appreciate it. Everyone knows that they're sort of going up in value and stuff like that, but it's probably still not the car for everyone.
No, true.
You have to probably admit that. And I reckon that's probably the reason why there's a lot of cars that, might have 6 owners and people kind of go, oh, shit, like, is there something wrong with it if it's had 6 owners?
Sorry, Steve, does that list tell you how many Club Sport versions?
No, it doesn't break it down.
Break it down, because that'd be interesting too.
No.
Did you see, because that silver Club Sport is still for sale on car sales in Australia for 230,000, which I think is a great one. It's very low kilometres with the lightweight buckets and everything. And I noticed Autohouse
12 Arctic Silvers.
Really? Yeah, so that's Arctic Silver, so that's quite rare. And I noticed that Autohouse just listed a 996 GT3 in black for 165,000, which doesn't look too bad either. I saw that on the website last night.
Yeah, that'd be a great car as well.
Yeah, so there's a Gen 1. It's a 2000 996 GT3, but it's got high kilometres. I think it's got about 80,000, 85, 90,000 kilometres on it.
Yeah, that's not that high. I mean, it's high maybe compared to some, but like even mine's ticked over 81, but
you've driven it. You've driven it well. Speaking about that, before we go, because we're coming to the end of the podcast today, roads. Let's just talk about roads, because you have driven a lot, and I know some of those miles were when you were sort of using it as a daily. But when was the first drive when you jumped in the GT3 and you realised how special it was, when you could actually take it a little bit, not to its limit, but you could actually like really ring it out? Do you remember the road you were on?
Oh, no, I can't. I would have, for sure I would have gone up the old Pacific Highway, which anyone that is a enthusiast in Sydney sort of basically does. It's a bit of a ritual. But like I've now kind of come to like the drive down south more than the old Pacific Highway, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree, because it's longer, isn't it? And we're talking about the road through the national park where you go south of Sydney and you go to the famous bridge that we've talked about before.
Yeah, but like the GT3, I think it's just the biggest difference between that and either of the previous 911s. It's the sound is different. Like the old air-cooled engines actually kind of sound, they're actually kind of more characterful. Like you really have to rev a GT3 out to kind of get the full sort of audio experience. But I think the step up in terms of the handling and the grip It's possibly partly because it's on, semi-slicks or whatever they're called. Like, my car came with P0 Courses when I took delivery of it, and then I've put Cup 2s on it.
Yeah, which is sticky.
But you noticed it. I could tell you noticed it when you drove it. Like, even the difference between your car and my car, like if I'm chasing you or you're chasing me,
it's planted.
It sticks. Like, you don't have to brake for the corners.
No, you brake a lot. You can see that you can brake later. I mean, I was being very cautious that day, but I could actually feel it that I can brake a little bit later here. I don't have to brake so soon.
Yeah.
Did you think that? I mean, even though you're sort of going faster, but it felt more planted. But you haven't really reached the limit on it, have you? On the roads, you can't really.
No, I don't reckon I have.
And you haven't ever had have you ever had a situation where you've lost grip?
No, not even close. I'm sure I've never ever been close to the limits of that car. And so compare that, for example, like when I was a lot younger and more reckless in the WRX, and I seriously would kind of cane that cars. Because that was four-wheel drive and you just kind of drive like an absolute maniac around corners because the thing was so sticky.
Cane means drive like an idiot, right? To Americans who may not know that term.
Oh, sorry, yes. But the GT3 in corners is like that, where it is just so sticky. So I've got no idea, like when you kind of see people that really do know how to drive the thing and they're actually kind of sliding it and oversteering around a corner, like, you must be going so insanely quickly.
Yeah.
I know you can kind of prompt it, but all
right.
It is a very different sort of experience. Like, it's so much more. There's so much more performance in it.
Yeah. So roads. What road? I mean, favorite roads, or what is the road that you'd like to take the GT3 on that you haven't taken on already? I know you've been through Tasmania.
Tassie.
Yeah, I was going to say you've been through Tasmania before in a normal car.
Yeah, I'd love to take it down to Tassie. I reckon that would be a good thing one day when you guys are back in Sydney, to kind of do a nice little road trip around Tasmania. I've done around Cradle Mountain. We went north of Cradle Mountain, and the roads there were amazing.
Yeah,
I reckon probably anywhere in Tassie would be really good in the GT3.
Yeah, I have to admit I wouldn't mind doing Tasmania as well. I think you'd have to give yourself, at least 4 days, right, in Tasmania? 5 days.
Yeah, about that. I've done drives up. I've driven to Melbourne, which, like, if you kind of go not the freeway, that's quite a nice drive.
With the GT3?
I don't think I've done it in the GT3. I did in the 1M.
Oh, the 1M.
I really enjoyed that.
Did you? Yeah. I listened to the old podcast, and this is the reason why I asked you this by message the other day, and I didn't explain it properly yesterday. I listened to like I said, I'm catching up on a few Spike episodes because I didn't listen to them in London. I listened to them when I run here.
Sure.
And he'd just driven the 1M for the first time, Zuckerman's 1M. And he was raving how great it was. And I didn't realize Zuckerman's one is actually chipped slightly. It's actually been modded out a little bit.
Yeah, mine was as well.
You had the chip as well?
Yep.
It's a great car, and their prices, and as we discussed, I looked on car sales in Australia, and the 1Ms were like 60 odd, and now they're back up to 80 odd.
Yeah, I missed that car.
Missed the
boat.
boat.
Missed that car.
Should have kept it.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't be married if you did. So.
Actually, yeah, true. Hello to my lovely wife, if she can hear me. The road down towards Cooma, like down through Kosciuszko, that's pretty cool as well.
Oh, right. You mentioned that before, didn't you, that we should do that drive? I remember a while back.
But
I've driven to
6
Cooma.
hours.
I've driven to the Snowy Mountains before, Cooma, but I can't remember it. I just can't remember it.
They're amazing. It's such a nice place to come to.
You're making me, homesick. I'm already homesick and, depressed about it. But I really want to do these drives. I was saying to Tasha that, when we go back to Australia, I want to put some heavy miles on the car. I want to do a couple of really long drives, even if it's down to Melbourne or it's, up north or it's inland. I don't know about inland so far much because the roads, you get a lot of stone chips and whatever, but...
No, go to Mudgee. Mudgee, we did the trip. I've done that a couple of times in different cars. I can't remember. I don't think I've done it in the GT3, but driving to Mudgee. Mudgee's a really nice place to kind of. There's good places to stay and eat and all of that sort of stuff. But it's a great drive.
Yeah,
I suggested it to you guys before, and then just drive your way around like to Orange and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I've been. I did that when we had to do a shoot on a farm a few years back before an expo that was on, and we were in the Honda Odyssey, and we went out. Yep. We were actually out between Warren and those places, and we went back through Orange and Orange on the way, which is where I used to live when I was a kid, just near Orange. That's where I was. That was that small town I was telling you about. 2,000 people was just 30 minutes from Orange. So it's kind of weird. We actually went through the town when we were going on that road. It was very, very weird.
Right.
But I think that was good, Steve. I think we covered.
Sorry,
No, it's a good story, and I think we covered a lot of things that we haven't actually told the listeners about before. Told the people that listen to the podcast before, and I think I think you've got a great story. And like I said, you've owned 2 generations of air-cooled. You now own a water-cooled, and you own the pinnacle of the water-cooled, in my mind, the GT3. I can't guess what's going to be next. Like, I still think you're going to end up getting another 911. I think you'll keep the GT3, and I think you'll buy something else. I think it's going to happen eventually.
I can't imagine ever getting out of it. But, like there's obviously other things in life that kind of happen and come along. I don't... I still think it's a car for life kind of thing. So,
but that 991.2 Miami blue one that's for sale near you, I looked at it again last night in the manual. I didn't realize it had leather as well. It's got leather dashboard and everything. That is a nice car. That is a nice car.
Yeah.
And as we spoke, I still think you could live with the Miami blue more than you could with the green.
Yeah, but having said that, I was laughing at myself because I kind of realised that my 993 was Aventura green, and that actually is green. It's kind of more like a grey green, so it's not quite, it's a bit more neutral. But so even though I was sort of, it's not that I don't like green cars. I was just sort of curious that that it was so fashionable at the moment more than anything. Yeah,
it doesn't look like the oak green though. And normally they come with tan interior, and yours had the black interior 993, so it kind of toned it down, didn't it?
But Aventura is a great colour. I'm really glad they brought it back for the 992. It was really interesting, sort of catches the light differently, etc.
Yeah, it's a different. Obviously, they've changed the colour which Porsche do over the years, even though they called it the same. It does look slightly different. I haven't seen one in real life. I've only seen photos and videos. But I think if I bought a 992, I would buy either that green, Aventura green, or I would buy GT Silver. I know it's boring silver, but I still like silver 911s.
No, GT Silver's cool.
So it would either be GT Silver or the green. And I would get those seats, the club sport seats, like I said, I would get those seats. I'm even tempted to get wood interior if I was to buy one. I don't know.
Is it?
I don't know.
Yeah, right.
I don't know if that's old man Jaguar. I think Nick said it was a bit Jaguar. But it does actually look good with that.
That was me as well, I think.
Yeah, it looks good with those seats, but I probably wouldn't. I'd probably get the matte carbon. All right. Thanks, Steve. I think that was good.
No worries. Cool.
Man, we've some days we have a lot to talk about. We have a lot to chat about, don't we? We've gone on for an hour and 20. I hope everyone's still there and listening and enjoying this podcast.
Sorry.
No, don't apologize. I think it's good. It's a good story. Like I said, you've got a great story. And also, everyone knows that your wife has a Macan Turbo, white Macan Turbo, which Steve sent me. I just want to say this. Steve sent me an image that his wife Cindy had taken when she was out at lunch outside of Sydney, and there was
that's right.
There was what's the word? Abundance of supercars, whether they be Cayman GT4, GT3 RS, 458 Speciale, all in the car park where she was parking. And there's one photo where there's I think it's the one with the Cayman, the GT4 next to the car. It's GT4, wasn't it? And you can see the rear of the turbo. And I have to say that the Macan Turbo, it holds its ground when you see that rear view. It's a pretty, it's a nice car.
Yeah, it's really quite a nice looking car.
Especially in the turbo, like when you get it, when it's spec'd out like that, it looks pretty special.
You can't complain. You'd be a very spoilt man if I was complaining about it.
Yeah. No, I just thought in that photo, the photo I'm talking about, it actually looked pretty cool,
yes,
that half side, and you see it, and it's like, man, it still looks really cool. Still better than when you were thinking about buying a Volvo or something, and I said, don't buy a Volvo. Remember?
I asked I asked Cindy if she deliberately parked it up there, and she sort of said, "Yeah, didn't mean to, but it just sort of fits." So.
No, it held the ground. Not a sports car, but it still held the ground. All right, Steve. Thanks for sharing your story again today. I think everyone's going to enjoy this one. I think we're going to get a lot of downloads in this one. I think people are going to enjoy that story. It's a good one. So thanks for sharing that.
No props, anytime.
So I just want to come back to the podcast. Like I said, we don't have sponsors on this podcast. We just have Patreon. So if you go to PorscheCooled, just search PorscheCooled at Patreon. If you want to join there, that will help us. Also, the other thing that really helps us and may attract sponsors like Porsche or whoever else might want to come and do an ad on our show is to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. I know Apple Podcasts is a bit of a pain in the ass to do for reviews. If you don't have the time to review or log in, I think you can just give a rating. So just give a rating. That would be great. All this basically helps. It helps us to be seen. It helps us appear in search results. It helps us to get up in the Apple charts, which attracts more viewers and attracts more interest in our podcast. And that's what we want to do. We want to keep it going for a long time. But thanks for all the support. Thanks again, Steve.
No worries.
We'll see you next week. I'll see you next week. No one else will. I can see you now, but we'll talk next week.
Cool.
Have you been enjoying PorscheCooled stories, by the way? Did you enjoy Nick's one?
Yeah, I did. And James's as well. It was kind of interesting to hear some of the little insights in that. So keep it up, mate.
Cool.
I'm trying to think of other people for you to talk to as well. But hopefully you get some listeners that are kind of interested in joining in.
There is a few listeners. And I also have a couple of other people, which I'll tell you about off recording, that I might ask. One guy in the US who I might ask for the next one. But there are a couple of people, a guy from Patreon who sponsors us on Patreon, member on Patreon, and a few other people have approached me, so I will do those. I just need to have a bit of a clear head. So I think this Tuesday coming up for the PorscheCooled stories, we might not have one this Tuesday. Like I said, it's not going to be every month. Maybe we do 2 a month, Steve. I just stagnate them.
Yeah, sure.
If I record them and there's one available, we'll put it up. But in general, it's going to be just for the listeners. It's probably like... It'd be 2 a month, I think, but at the moment, there won't be one next week. There won't be one next Tuesday because I just don't have the time to do it this week.
Yeah, so here you go. It's a lot of work, mate.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. This is a PorscheCooled podcast. You were listening to Steve's story. Steve is in Sydney. I am in Bahrain. My name is Michael Barth. So thank you for listening and bye for now.